Hi, and welcome to week 13. It is crazy to think that this is your last week with a major lecture, that next week we'll be starting your final. So, putting together all that we've learned throughout the term, I hope you are feeling more comfortable in Maya. I hope that you're enjoying working in Maya, and always feel free to reach out. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you're thinking about, please feel free to email me. This week, you are going to be creating a hand model. Hands are difficult. If you've tried to, drawing them, it's the same kind of deal. You're going to model a detailed hand. You will need to take pictures of the top, bottom, and side of your own hand, or you can use somebody else's if that's easier for you, but I want you to take your own images. Then you'll line up and scale the images so that they match in Photoshop. If you need to use a different software, that's fine too, but I need you to make sure that these images actually line up. You will import them into Maya, model the hand. It can be left or right, does not matter to me. Pay attention that the edge loops around the knuckles are rounded. So looking at your knuckles, you can see that it's like a frown face above them and a smiley face below them with your skin and how they bend. What you're going to want to do is give an edge loop down the center of the knuckle, an edge loop above, and an edge loop below. What that will help to do is in the future to be able to bend your hand, bend your fingers. They're going to bend at the knuckle, so you need extra edges around it to deform. You want to get the dimensions of the fingers to look as realistic as possible. Know that if you were doing a full character model, this would need to be attached to the arm. So think about when you did your characters and pretty much how low poly your arms were. Merging, what we would do is take vertices and merge from the hand to the arm. So generally you're going to have a lower number on the arms. So while I'm saying that you need to model a detailed hand, you're still going to want to keep it as low poly as possible. Now, I'm going to show you just briefly without importing references because I don't want to lead you guys too much. We're pretty far along in the course, and so I believe in your skills as is. But what you're going to want to do is start with some edge loops. Think about it. Okay, well, I've got 4 fingers that are going to come from the top here, and I'm going to have a thumb that's going to come out from the bottom. It's not going to be the very, very bottom here, but if you look, if you kind of space out your fingers here, the thumb actually does kind of come out from the bottom here. So you're going to need to create that whole section from the bottom to the webbing between your thumb and your pointer finger. Finger anatomy, man. Okay, not that way. And not that way. 3rd time's the charm. All right, so I've got 4 this way. I'm just going to do 1 for right now, knowing that, of course, we can add more as we go along, but we're keeping it as simplified as we can. Knowing, too, I can always take this edge loop, double-click to select the whole thing, and I can move it down. Now this is where having your drawings is going to really come into play, because I'm just kind of winging it, and when you don't get something right, it's very obvious. So I'll start by going into face mode. I can grab all these fingers and do them at once, or I can do them one at a time. It's kind of up to you. Just know though, oops, I do not want to keep faces together, because these are going to need to be separate. If I look at my hand, my first knuckles are not even, right? So I'm going to need to go back in and match my drawings here and make sure I'm bringing down. I don't want these to be perfectly symmetrical, so I can do something like that. Now, your fingers aren't going to be, you can take pictures of them completely touching, but even if I look at my own hand, if I make them touch, there's bend and curves to it. So you're going to want to start separating. Maybe we scale things down a little bit and separate them. Again, this is what it's all about, having all of that reference for. Okay, now what I was saying with the knuckles is when we get to a knuckle, and I'll just use this one finger here for an instance, I can do an extrude, and then I'll use my hotkey G to do it again. Okay. Now I'm going to want to insert an edge loop down the center here and start to shape this out. Now this is more detailed, so you'll want to get your whole hand modeled first, then you can start to do this. But I can go into vertex mode and start shaping these out. Okay, so by doing this, I'm getting that knuckle and I'm getting that extra edge loop section. So again, if I were to rig this and go through with it, if I bend it, there's room to bend. Now you'll notice the same thing. You have knuckles where your fingers meet your hand. So you'll need to insert some edge loops around here to get that knuckle detail. When it comes to creating the nail, you'll just want to move the vertices around. So let's say I'm going to scale to make that flat again. You can always insert an edge loop or whatever you need to do, but let's say I want this to be the nail. So I can, and you can see how easily this becomes high poly, right? I mean, because technically I can do this and do that, and then go into vertex mode. I don't need to click and drag over these because I'm not shaping the bottom of the finger. We'll get to that in a second, but the bottom of your finger is very round, right? Where we have the pads of our fingers. So you're going to want to actually shape that slightly different. Now maybe you're like, well, this is kind of rounding it out. So then, you know, maybe you would want to select both sides. Just something to pay attention to. Oops. Still had me in my insert edge loop. Maybe I bring it out a little. I'm going to scale it. And then maybe I'll reshape this upper one. You know, your nails are pretty much on top, so you don't have to worry too much. But maybe I bump this forward. Look at a top view. And I'm always hitting Q if my gizmo gets in the way. All right, but we get the idea. Okay, and then maybe I would actually merge these ones together because maybe I don't want that height there. That's up to you, or you can bring it down just to be right above the finger. Okay, now this is still feeling pretty boxy, right? So if I hit 3, I get more of the rounded look that I'm going for. You may still have to clean it up. And I talked about this with some of your previous models, but we do have mesh and then smooth. Now this is going to take every face that I have and turn it into 4. So you're going to want to save before and after you do this. But if I do a mesh smooth, now it's actually giving me the edge loops that are making it smooth, so I can go in and edit those. So see, I can still hit 1 and 3 and it changes, but in 1 I can see. One thing that you guys kind of struggled with your characters sometimes was rounding this out. Now, a smooth isn't going to help you to round everything out. What you're going to need to do is start doing that on your own. So, insert an edge loop. This is probably, you're going to need to look at your drawings and shape for the dimensions because some of this is going to be thicker than others. But you need to go into vertex mode or edge mode or whatever you want to do and play around with scaling. So maybe if I get this middle one and I kind of scale outward a little bit, you can start to see the roundness. But you're always going to run into where a full edge loop, like if I stretch this all the way, look at what it's doing over here. It's not going to work all the way around. So you're going to have to go in and individually select edges. Maybe I go in and I select this line of edges, and I am holding Shift to select multiple ones. But once I know I have that, maybe I can look in different views, start to pull this in. So you're starting to round it out on your own. Okay? Now with your thumb, I want to kind of see you explore how you would do this. To create the thumb, you can extrude and rotate out as you have before. We also have a tool that's called wedge. So I'm going to actually go into multi, which we haven't done before, but this allows you to select an edge, and I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to select the faces next to it. And if we go to Edit Mesh and down to Wedge, what you can see is it pulls the edges around, or pulls the faces around the edges. So I selected the wrong edges. Let me deselect these two and reselect these ones. Edit Mesh, Wedge. There we go. So this kind of creates a pie piece. Now, what do you notice, hopefully, is that it's creating a triangle, which isn't quite what we always want, but in this kind of situation, it is okay. So you can play around with the wedge angle, and you can play around with how many divisions. Again, starting more simply, probably the better. Okay, so something for you to think about. So you'll be creating this hand model. Something to kind of think about is creature concepts and creature hands or creature bodies. So how would we turn this into an alien hand or a bird claw hand, something that maybe doesn't exist. So a lot of times we get reference from existing things and turn them into something of our own. So again, I want you to make a human hand, but something to think about, kind of fun, creature modeling. All right, now we were doing stills for our previous assignments, and you had lighting and all that. So I wanted to briefly just talk about how we can create a fast scene for this, or an environment. So you can always create a cube, scale up the cube, and then I can go into face mode and delete two sides and the top. And now I have an environment for my hand to be on. We can go to two-sided lighting and then it'll look gray. The main thing is we never want to suspend our believability. You want people to be fully immersed, and a lot of times if we see the viewport, we're taken away from it. We're like, oh, that's a really awesome hand. Oh, it's 3D because I can see that they modeled it. So something to think about, if you didn't want to use a cube, you can always use a plane. You can use a plane and extrude up two of the sides, but this just allows you to, let's just make this a different color here, maybe. But this just allows you to separate your object from the background. I highly recommend that you do a middle gray for your background and then give some sort of a color to your object. Middle gray allows us to see the highlights in your project and the shadows. You know, if I have a dark, almost black shadow, it's going to get lost if my background is black, and if I have an almost white highlight, it's going to be gone if my background is white. So that's why a lot of times we use middle gray. Let's see if this will work this time. There we go. So whatever it may be, let's do green. So now I can set up my angle, I would set up my lighting, got my software going, just so now we can see the object, the shadowing on the object, and the environment behind it. Okay? So just something for you to think about in the future. All right, now back to the module. I just have how to do a turntable, which I will show you, but I just wanted to make sure you had it written as well. Last thing to do this week is animating a turntable to show off your hand model. A lot of times we do turntables in modeling. It's a great way to show off a 360 of your model. You'll need to compile the still files and turn in an H.264 render. You may add lighting, texture, and color if wanted, but I'm looking for a 360-degree turn around your hand. Okay, I guess I'll just use this hand. You're going to want to rotate it probably to be somewhat standing. I'm going to remove this box. You could set up lighting, but know that we are going around this 360 degrees. So if I light it from the front, when it gets to the back, it will not be well lit. So you'll want to create lighting from, a couple different angles, or you can leave it for this assignment. What you'll want to do is create whatever angle. Let me turn on my resolution gate. Let me go into my render settings here. I'll do 1280 by 720 just to expedite what we're doing for this assignment. But this looks like a pretty good angle, okay? Then what you'll do is you'll go down to the animation drop box here. You'll go to visualize and create turntable. You'll hit the option box next to it. So this says the number of frames, 200 frames. That's generally a nice slow turn, but it'll be a nice turn to be able to show off all of your model. And then you can decide if you want it clockwise or counterclockwise. Generally clockwise is standard, but it doesn't matter. And then all you'll click is turntable. I'm sorry, you have to select your object first, and then you'll select turntable. It needs to know what it's creating the turntable around. What it's doing is creating the turntable at the height and the distance you are away from your object, 360 degrees around. Now, I told the turntable to turn for 200 frames, so I need to go down here and make sure 200 frames are visible on my time slider. We're not going to get into animation, we're not going to get into details about keys, but if you hit play, you can see I get a nice turntable 360 degrees around the object. It even does a little ease in, easing out. You'll also notice it created a new camera for me, turntable camera. So I'm no longer in my perspective view. I can't move, rotate, and scale around it. I'm stuck with my turntable. Great. So once you get this, looks good. It's not getting cut off at any point. You can always undo the turntable or go back to your perspective view, select your hand, and then redo the turntable. But now we need to render. So I'll go to my render settings. We've done stills before, but we've never done an actual video. So I will call this hand video, whatever you want to call it. Image format, I like Targa files. Up to you though, you can do Targa or JPEG or TIFF. Now, we need name.number.extension. We're not doing a single frame, we're doing all frames. Technically, you can render out of Maya, although in 2019 and 2020, there have been some issues with rendering directly to a movie. But I always recommend doing still frames because let's say your animation, video, still, whatever it is, takes an hour per frame, okay? Yours won't for this, but just know that's where it's going. If it takes an hour per frame, and I have to render 100 frames. Well, for our project here, we're doing 200 frames. So let's just say 200 frames. So that's 200 hours. If I'm rendering directly to a video and it gets through 199 frames and then crashes, I lose my entire video. If I get to 199 frames and it crashes and I'm making stills, I just have to go back in and render frame 199 and 200 and I'm done. So you want name.number.extension, not this one. Your computer does not know what a 1, 2, 3 file is. So name.number.extension. Hear me again, name.number.extension. I guarantee someone will accidentally click it. In my years of teaching this, it's always an issue. So name.number.extension. So it'll be handvideo.1.targa. handvideo.2.targa. It's going to fill in a number for each frame that I have. Then you have to tell it how many frames. So yours will be 1 to 200. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to do 1 to 20. We're going to render from our turntable camera, so I need to delete this perspective camera. Hit the garbage can. If you don't see your camera, just click the arrow here and go to turntable camera. You can do 1280 by 720 or 1920 by 1080. Up to you, just make sure it's a high definition ratio. All right, then close. Then we're gonna go down to rendering, render, batch render. You can just click on the words. Continue. Now I think my computer cuts it off, but right down here, it's gonna say rendering with Maya software. And if you move to the right a little bit, there's a button with a semicolon in it. I'm going to click that semicolon. That opens up our script editor. So now this is going to go through. It hasn't started rendering yet. Once it does, it's going to move very quickly until, there we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're on 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So obviously it does not take an hour per frame for this, but we can see rendering done. Completed. And then here is where you're going to need to go to find them. It's always going to be in the same spot in your documents. Maya, projects, default, images, and video. Now I didn't have any lighting and I had put some stuff in, so we're not going to be able to see it quite like it was, but that's okay. All right, so then you can save your file. And I would close Maya. And we're going to open up After Effects. For those of you that don't have After Effects, please send me an email. I mean, you can always use the computer lab, but we can try to figure out some different options for you. I'm going to pause while mine opens. So I'm not going to get into too many details in After Effects. I'm just going to show you how to compile this together. So what we can do is you can go to New Project. I'm just going to right mouse click in this empty area and go to Import File, this top one. File, Import File. So File at the top, Import File, or right mouse click, it's the exact same thing. Then I have to navigate through that again. So Documents, Maya, Projects, Default, Images. Now, the great thing about this being name.number.extension is After Effects recognizes this as a sequence. So I will only grab the first one, make sure Target Sequence is turned on, and hit Open. You'll just hit OK. And then I will click and drag down. All right. So there is no background to my Targa file. So what I can do is I can create a rectangle that goes in the background. So what you're going to need to do is make sure you're not clicked on any layer. You can always click in the negative space, and we're going to go to our rectangle tool. And with your rectangle tool selected, you'll just click and drag the size of your composition. If you go over, that's fine, it won't show. You can always click right up here in the fill color if you need to change the color. And then we'll just need to click and drag that to be the bottom layer so I can see your main object. Okay, so easy as that. If I hit spacebar, I hit plays. Obviously I only rendered 20 frames, so mine is a very short amount of animation. Yours will go all the way around. So now I'm going to go to composition, add to media encoder queue. What this is going to do is allow us to turn this from an After Effects file into an actual video file. Now, this process takes a little bit of time. Sometimes I get antsy and I go to composition and add to render or media encoder queue again. There's no need. Media encoder is opening. Just give it a little bit of time. Oh, well, that went way faster than I anticipated. I hope yours goes faster too. So we'll see up here we have hand video, so I know that's the right one. I'll drop down to H264. I can leave this the same, and then you'll just click on the words here. Anywhere is fine, and you can determine where you want to save this. I'll move it to my desktop, save, and then hit the play button here. You'll notice down here it's starting to render, and it'll go through and show you when it has begun and when it will finish. Doodaloo, all done. So now if I go to my desktop, I can see my hand video. All right, and that's what you'll submit, the actual MP4 video. Okay? I hope you guys have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions.